on BBC Radio 5 Sports Extra.
Hello and welcome to Qatar, which hosts the penultimate round of the Formula One World Championship. A country made rich by pearls, about to be enriched by the sounds and sights of 20 Formula One cars racing around the Lusail International Circuit. We're gearing up for the final sprint race of the season, a 100-kilometre dash, no pit stops, so 19 laps of flat-out racing. And whilst the Drivers' Championship was secured by Max Verstappen last week in Las Vegas, there are still scores to be settled. The biggest prize in the Constructors' Championship is up for grabs, with a fight between McLaren and Ferrari rumbling on, and points, albeit less than a regular Grand Prix, are up for grabs under the lights as the sun has now set. So, to guide you through all of it alongside myself, Harry Benjamin, is the McLaren Formula E driver Sam Bird, the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson, but giving us the lowdown on the ground, from the grid to the pit lane and the paddock, there's nowhere she can't get to. Good evening, Rosanna.
Good evening, Harry. Yes, it's a bit of a mad dash in the lead up to a sprint race. We don't have the traditional national anthem, so the grid activity just sort of drifts towards the start of the sprint. So everybody's just been rushing off the grid, through the pit lane, back into the paddock to find their seats. And I tell you what, when the sun sets here, the temperature drops quickly. It says it's about 21 degrees, but it feels so much cooler, and it is very breezy here. Those signs on the motorway still there saying strong wind, drive carefully. It's incredibly gusty. As I look at the trees surrounding the circuit and the flags, they are fluttering. What does that mean for the cars this evening? It's going to be an extra challenge for the drivers during this sprint race. Yeah, compared to last year, as you say, this race happening a few weeks later. And Sam, this track, the Lusail International Circuit, just over 5.4 kilometres, there's 16 turns. Where are the key overtaking opportunities around this circuit?
Harry, you've got to look at turn one as the ultimate area to overtake, but we've seen moves done around the outside at turn two, we've seen moves into turn four. This is a high-speed circuit, so following closely is very tricky, but I'd definitely say we're going to see a lot of action going into turn one.
Yeah, it's just over a kilometre long straight down to turn one, and turn two, which is made up of first a right-hand U-bend, then into a left-hand U-bend, short straight, then you get into the middle section a bit more technical, tight and twisty, through some sweeping S's, then you curve up round into the final sector through a triple right-hander of 12, 13 and 14, then you're almost spat out into a sharp left-hander out of turn 15 that guides you down to the final turn, the right-hander of turn 16. It's high, medium speed corners, as Sam said, long duration corners as well, and quite a smooth surface. And Andrew Benson, the BBC's F1 correspondent, that has changed up the pecking order slightly. Building into this weekend, Ferrari themselves are a bit all doom and gloom, and in the sprint qualifying results that has been reflected. They're behind both McLarens, but also the Mercedes of George Russell.
Yeah, I think Mercedes were reasonably confident coming here. It's fast corners and medium speed corners, which their car's very good at. Remember Silverstone and Spa, where Lewis Hamilton won, and it's not bumpy, it's smooth surface, and that means they can run the car low, and that's where the Mercedes likes to be. When it's bumpy and they have to lift the car up, it loses more performance than the other cars around it. So I'm not surprised to see George Russell second between the McLarens, and I think he quite fancies his chances. The McLarens are protecting a lead in the Constructors' Championship. They can clinch that this weekend, although it's going to be difficult for them against Ferrari, so they won't want to take too many risks with an aggressive Russell.
Well, let's see what happens as they go down towards turn one. It's just about 370 metres from pole to turn one. Rosanna.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was chatting to one of the engineers waiting for George Russell to be pushed up the grid through all the people on the grid. He said it's taking a while, there are so many people here, but he said to me, pole here is so important. And of course George Russell isn't on pole, it's Lando Norris. And it's interesting because George Russell's actually got the inside line going into turn one, but they really think pole has the advantage here. And Sam, you can explain why, because from a driver's point of view, these tracks behave so differently, don't they? Some tracks really favour pole, and sometimes we get the drivers complaining that pole doesn't actually give you an advantage, conversely.
Yeah, absolutely. The Qatar circuit is obviously it's in the desert, and when the cars aren't running, that dust, that kind of sand and grit gets put onto the circuit. Now, when you're running flat out on the racing line, which is where Lando Norris finds himself on pole position on the left-hand side of that straight, that cleans up. However, on second, on the right-hand side of the straight, that's not the case. Cars haven't been there too often over the course of yesterday's running or this morning's running on the circuit. So we would expect the people on the left-hand side, Lando Norris's side, people first, third, fifth, etc., to have a slightly better start than the people on the even numbered grid slots.
Well, it's just ticked past 5 o'clock in the evening in Qatar. We're just north of Doha and the formation lap is underway. So let's run you through how they line up for this, the final sprint of the season. It is Lando Norris in the McLaren on pole. Alongside him is George Russell. Then comes Piastri, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc for Ferrari. Rounds out the top 5. Max Verstappen, having clinched his 4th World Championship last week, can only do 6th on the grid under the lights this evening, ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Then it's the fight for best of the rest. It's Gasly in 8th. Then comes Hulkenberg. Liam Lawson rounds out the top 10. Fernando Alonso is 11th, ahead of Alex Albon. Then comes Valtteri Bottas for 13th, for Sauber, ahead of Stroll. Magnussen is the top 15. Then it's Tsunoda, Esteban Ocon and Zhou Guanyu. Just 18 cars on the grid, with Sergio Perez in the other Red Bull and Franco Colapinto in the Williams electing to change their setups. That's breaking the Parc Fermé rules, so they will start from the pit lane. 18 cars on the grid, 2 from the pit lane. And if you need a reminder of how this sprint race works, it will only be 90 laps. It's around about a 100-kilometre dash to the flag. No mandatory pit stops, and points awarded to the top 8 only. 8 for the win, all the way down to 1 point if you finish in that 8th spot. So there are less points up for grabs, but they are quite crucial at the moment, Sam, because we have a fierce fight between, well, your team, McLaren, and Ferrari. There is less than a race win between them, just 24 points. It's crucial for McLaren to maximise their advantage this evening.
Absolutely. This isn't just a normal sprint race. This really, really matters. A lot of points on the board this afternoon, and yeah, McLaren are going to have to look to maximise this. They had a difficult time out in Vegas last weekend. What can they do this afternoon and tomorrow? Because they certainly have got the pace advantage.
If McLaren want to seal the title this weekend, they need 1-2 in this sprint, and they need to finish 1-2 in the Grand Prix on Sunday with the fastest lap as well. But they've got to get through the sprint first. And talking tyres, Rosanna Tennant, what are we thinking?
Well, they're just starting to creep onto the starting grid, and I can see that everybody bar Zhou Guanyu is starting on the medium tyre. That was the most likely choice, but talking to Pirelli, the tyre manufacturer, they were saying it's quite important to learn about the soft, and they were hoping someone would go on that tyre to learn about it for the Grand Prix. So a lot of people are going to be watching the Sauber of Zhou this evening to take some learnings away for tomorrow's big race.
Absolutely. Zhou, though, lining all the way up last on the grid, 18th out of the 18 cars. Just a reminder, 2 from the pit lane in the form of Sergio Perez and Franco Colapinto. Disappointing qualifying efforts for them yesterday in the sprint qualifying, but some serious faces then overlooking in the garages as the fluoro green Sauber lines up on the back of the grid. Last minute burnouts. Zhou Guanyu on that soft tyre, everybody else on the medium. The grandstands are packed, the phones are out filming. On the front row then, in second, will be the silver arrow of George Russell in the Mercedes. On pole position will be the papaya orange of McLaren. The sun has set, the floodlights are in full beam. It's time for the final sprint of the season as we go racing in Qatar, and it's a good start from Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri challenging George Russell for second. Norris has the lead sealed into turn 1. Russell sliding down the inside, keeping Piastri at bay, but that will give Piastri the inside line for turn 2, and it's a McLaren 1-2 as they lead out of turn 2. The 2 Ferraris dicing as well, with Lewis Hamilton making gains and splitting the 2 Ferraris. Sainz ahead of Leclerc.
Looks very low grip out there at the moment, Harry. All the cars twitching and very nervous as Oscar Piastri runs a little bit deep into turn 5 and just about manages to scramble around and hold on to that second place.
That's put George Russell all over the back of him, though, as Russell tries to have a little look down the inside of the right-hander of turn 7 that feeds you into the sweeping S's. First the slight left-hander of 8, then to the right of 9 before you get and curve up to turn 10, and now approaching the triple right right-handers of 12, 13 and 14. It's Norris, Piastri, Russell, the top three. Then it's Sainz, Hamilton with gains up to 5th ahead of Leclerc. Hulkenberg is leading the battle for best of the rest right now in the Haas for 7th. Gasly holding on to 8th spot. Verstappen has lost huge amount of places. He started this race in 6th. He's now down to 9th. Not a good start for the 4-time world champion. Fernando Alonso is 10th. Then comes Bottas, Magnussen, Stroll. Ocon made a good start to 14th. Then comes Albon in 15th. Lawson, also another driver to lose positions. He started inside the top 10. He's now down to 16th ahead of Joe. Sonoda 18th. Colapinto and Perez from the pit lane. All 20 drivers out on track as we start lap 2 of 19.
Perfect start for Lando Norris, wasn't it? It's cruising around in the lead. Probably over a second clear at the moment. Yeah, just over a second to his teammate Oscar Piastri. That's just what McLaren wanted. Looking at Ferrari though, Harry, for Sainz in 4th, Leclerc in 6th. If Hamilton gets past Sainz, what do Ferrari do? Charles Leclerc is fighting for 2nd in the Drivers' World Championship. He'll be screaming on the radio to surely get past Carlos Sainz and try and get as many points as he can in the sprint race today.
Yeah, just 21 points separating Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc for the runners-up spot. So it's not the top trophy, but it's pride for who can finish as 2nd place in the Formula One World Drivers' Championship. Over in the Constructors' Championship, it is going McLaren's way so far. They're doing what they needed to do. Norris leading Piastri by 1.2 seconds. George Russell still keeping on Piastri's toes, but just slotting in and getting into a rhythm. Colder temperatures experienced this time in Qatar compared to the exhaustive heat that we had last year. So a little bit more manageable perhaps for the driver, but that is changing the way the tyres behave in this race.
Absolutely. What we're seeing as well from Charles Leclerc, last weekend he was very, very aggressive on the back of George Russell in the opening phase of the Grand Prix in Vegas, as we see George Russell just sniffing and hunting around the gearbox of Oscar Piastri. Back to Charles Leclerc, he grained his front tyres terribly in Vegas, and that was a cool, cold racetrack. It's cool again here in Qatar. So has he learnt a little bit? He's about 1.5 seconds off the back of Hamilton. Is he trying to preserve that front tyre life?
DRS has now been enabled as well, that drag reduction system, giving you a little bit of a boost when it comes to kilometres per hour down that main straight. If you are within a second of the car ahead, that was how Russell was able to close up on the back of Piastri, but Piastri had it in hand for the moment. Then comes Sainz in 4th, Hamilton, Leclerc, Hulkenberg, Gasly, who's got Verstappen trying to recover all over the back of him, 0.6 of a second splitting them. Alonso rounds out the top 10, but it's advantage McLaren in these early stages of the F1 sprint under the lights in Qatar. Rosanna.
Yeah, they've got it under control, haven't they, at the moment, Harry? And we're expecting some graining this weekend, but actually during yesterday's practice session and qualifying itself, the graining wasn't as bad as expected, and there's very limited performance degradation. So McLaren have suffered this year with front graining, so the fact that graining isn't an issue so much as perhaps they thought it would be this weekend is really playing to their strengths now.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rosanna. Coming across the line for lap 4, Norris has Piastri within a second, but Piastri in the second McLaren is having to look in his mirrors because George Russell, with the aid of DRS, dives down the inside through the right-hander of turn 1, sparks flying from the underside of that silver arrow, gets alongside Piastri, but the Australian in the McLaren bites back through the left-hander of turn 2 and holds the position, but Piastri is under pressure here from Russell behind, and while they're fighting, that's playing into the hands of Carlos Sainz and the Ferrari behind, closing in.
Just turn into me.
That was George Russell saying that Piastri just turned into him, not happy with how that racing was going. Andrew.
I think the Mercedes has quite a performance advantage here, Sam, don't you think? To be able to follow this closely through around a circuit with so many fast, long corners, it says to me that the Mercedes is the quicker car, certainly compared to Piastri. I don't know how much Norris is managing his tyres.
Yeah, absolutely. I would completely agree. It does look like the Mercedes, but at this stage, George Russell definitely has the upper hand compared to Lewis Hamilton, has looked more comfortable all weekend. I think it's only a matter of time before George Russell puts a move on Oscar Piastri. Their tyre life's been strong, and this circuit does suit them, as well as the ambient conditions.
Just had a little look at the start replay as well. The big losers, Liam Lawson absolutely plummeted down the order, and then Max Verstappen also getting absolutely nicked off the line by Lewis Hamilton, then made his way through the right-hander of turn 1, but he had Gasly going well up the inside, almost went into the back of the Ferrari. Ahead did Verstappen, and it was the Haas as well, almost going into the back of Verstappen through the left-hander of turn 2. Verstappen just couldn't get it turned in, no grip, and he lost out to the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg.
Well, we saw, didn't we, everybody struggling.
Wow, over-serious for an understatement.
Yeah, we saw everybody struggling, especially Max Verstappen on that opening lap, just unable to fire those medium compound tyres up. Now we're watching a replay of George Russell into turn 1, down the inside. And it looked like there was a slight touch there. Oscar Piastri reclaimed the line and almost didn't give George Russell the room. I think in the end that was fair racing. That's my unbiased view, of course, Harry.
That's the voice of the McLaren Formula E driver, Sam Bird.
Look, I'm unbiased. I'm here for the Formula One, but McLaren are doing a great job out front.
They are, they're doing what they need to do, and there is no arguing with that. Piastri is keeping Norris within a second. I wonder how strategical that may be, because Norris will be helping Piastri by giving him a bit of DRS here down the main straight, and that could be crucial for the Aussie in the papaya McLaren, currently lying in second and keeping Russell behind. McLaren will be desperate to try and secure the Constructors' title at the first time of asking this weekend. They will not want to leave it right to the wire in Abu Dhabi, and that DRS for Piastri that he gets off the back of his teammate Lando Norris, who leads this race, is helpful and is keeping him ahead of Russell at this stage.
Yeah, we saw that done, executed to perfection last season by Carlos Sainz in Singapore. I think a team like McLaren would have looked at that and learnt, and could potentially be employing those tactics here this evening.
Lap 6 of 19, Norris leads Piastri, Russell, Sainz, Hamilton, Leclerc, Hülkenberg, Gasly. They are the point scorers, the top 8 receiving points in this race. Then it's Verstappen and Magnussen, the top 10. We're on lap 6 of 19. Let's check in with Rosanna Tennant.
It's interesting, isn't it? There could be a headache on the horizon for McLaren. Coming into this weekend, Oscar Piastri was asked, are you free to race your teammate Lando Norris now that the title has been sewn up in the Drivers' Championship? And he said absolutely. So who knows, okay, there might be an element of protection going on at the moment with Lando Norris drawing Piastri in to help him defend from Russell, but you never know, that could give Oscar Piastri the chance to actually go for the lead here. He got it down to 4/10 on the last lap.
Absolutely, fine margins in Formula One. They're not able to shake each other. The top 5 all within the same shot as we're watching. I tell you what, we're also seeing a picture-in-picture of Kevin Magnussen start in the Haas. He started down in 15th. That Haas was a rocket ship off the line. He's made his way now up into 10th. It's always going to be a hard charge having to overtake during this sprint race, but Magnussen was the driver that almost went into the back as well of Max Verstappen, who is still down in 9th. He cannot find a way through on Pierre Gasly. That Alpine, with upgrades being added over the course of the last few races, they've got great straight line speed advantage now, has Gasly in that all-pink Alpine. So much so they got a bit too quick in Las Vegas and blew up their own engine, hoping that doesn't happen this time around. But at the moment, Verstappen's on course not to score any points here. Confirmation as well, Lando Norris on the radio saying he is trying to help Oscar Piastri behind him by giving him DRS. The gap between them is 0.8 of a second. Between Piastri and Russell, who is in 3rd, that's 0.7 of a second. So Norris is creating a bit of a DRS train here, all in aid of his teammate Piastri to keep him at bay. But Piastri just seems to be a little bit more unsettled in that McLaren. Had almost a little moment there coming out of the turn in the first sector, coming through turn 10 I should say, as he makes his way now into the final sector. So that McLaren in Piastri's hands, the grip there is just struggling slightly for him.
Yeah, he just ran a little bit wide. We've seen that so many times already this weekend. Drivers just running a little bit wide and then catching too much curve. That radio message to me says Lando Norris knows and thinks he's got more pace in that car. He's trying to do his best for the team, but there will come a point if he feels under threat from Oscar Piastri where he could just put the hammer down and sail off into the sunset.
Max Verstappen with DRS dives down the inside of his former teammate Pierre Gasly. The Red Bull now in front of the pink Alpine. Gasly didn't fight that one too hard, but that move has taken far too long for Max Verstappen's liking. He now gets himself up into the points-paying positions. It's just the 1 point at the moment, though, in 8th. His next target will be Nico Hülkenberg. This is good news for the Haas driver, looking to pick up a couple of points this evening and continue Haas's advance in 6th in the Constructors' Championship. It's Hülkenberg in 7th, then Verstappen, Gasly and Magnussen round out the top 10. Rosanna.
And of course, Harry, you only get points down to P8, don't you? So Verstappen making that move on Pierre Gasly is actually hugely important when it comes to that battle. I know you're very keen on P6 in the Constructors. Alpine then not coming away from this sprint currently with a point. So Gasly will be super frustrated that Verstappen got past. But as you say, it was an easy move by the Red Bull driver. Absolutely.
We're coming into this weekend just 4 points separating Haas, Alpine and RB for that coveted 6th place in the Constructors. That means quite literally millions of dollars for those teams in prize money come the end of the season. As we come across the line then to begin lap 9 of 19, Norris leads Piastri, who has DRS off his teammate, but it's Russell who keeps on applying the pressure in his Mercedes. It's a late dart to the inside for Russell. Will that unsettle Piastri? No, he's not close enough. Oscar Piastri is holding on for 2nd right now. Russell 3rd. Carlos Sainz is lurking in the mirrors as well. In the Ferrari in 4th, he's dropped Lewis Hamilton slightly, and Charles Leclerc isn't making too much of an imprint in this race either. He's about a 2nd behind Hamilton, down in 6th.
It's a really powerful DRS down that front straight, roughly worth about half a second of lap time. So Lando Norris exits the final corner 9/10 clear of his teammate. By the time they break into turn 1, that's down to 3.5, 4/10. If George Russell can be within 4/10 of Oscar Piastri, I think the move is on for 2nd place.
Norris, Piastri, Russell, that is your top 3 at the moment. Then comes Sainz, Hamilton, Leclerc, your top 6 drivers. The point scorers are currently rounded out by Hülkenberg and Max Verstappen. Then comes Gasly and Magnussen, who is 10th, ahead of Alonso. Bottas is 12th, Stroll, Ocon and Albon is 15th. Lawson is at a sprint race to forget, started inside the top 10, plummeted down to 16th, only ahead of his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, who had a poor qualifying, started 16th, he's now down to 17th. Colapinto from the pit lane is now 18th, keeping the Red Bull of Sergio Perez behind in 19th. Zhou Guanyu's soft tyres look like they've given up the ghost. He's down to 20th and last and is quite the way off the pace compared to those ahead of him. With 10 laps to go then of this, the final sprint of the season, as we rapidly approach the end of this, the longest season in Formula One. And right now, Lando Norris feels like he's keeping pace in hand, helping his teammate out through giving him the aid of DRS. Right now, that gap stands at between half a second. Now, this is interesting. This is the sound of Sergio Perez peeling away from the pit lane at the start, but about 3 seconds after the green light came on. And as a result, Colapinto, who started behind him in the pit lane, saw the green light and said, "Get on with it, mate," and ended up overtaking him on the pit lane exit. What on earth was going on there for Perez, Sam?
I've never seen that before, Harry. I don't understand. Once you see the green light, you go. And he was just taking his time as if he was asleep. I really don't get that. It's been a very difficult year for Sergio Perez. I think one that he will look back on and try his best to forget.
Well, might it be, Rosanna, one he looks back on as his final season in Formula One. Still rumours swirling about that seat being up for grabs next year.
And of course, Franco Colapinto, currently the Williams driver, one of the names being thrown around as a potential replacement for Sergio Perez. So looking at that order, it's sort of very demonstrative of what's going on off track as well, isn't it? With Colapinto keeping Perez behind. And further back as well, we've got Zhou Guanyu, who took that gamble on the soft tyre. That has not paid off. And as I said at the very beginning, the teams will be looking to Zhou and the performance of that soft tyre. So what will that mean for tomorrow's Grand Prix? You've got to keep half an eye on tomorrow's action, of course. Does that mean that people won't want to go on that faster starting tyre come the Grand Prix? And if you're starting out of position, maybe you can't bolt that soft tyre on and make it work to your advantage. So a bit of learning going on in sort of tandem at the moment, isn't there? Sprint race plus learning for the Grand Prix. It's all go.
Yeah, well, we're effectively getting a preamble to the first 19 laps of the Grand Prix tomorrow, aren't we? And tyres were very much the talk of Qatar last year, with lots of tyre damage going on. Pirelli having to go away and, well, first of all, implement a mandated pit stop for the Grand Prix last year. Such was the safety concerns over the tyres lasting and basically bursting and puncturing and causing damage and mayhem. This year, though, they're confident. They've made changes. They've run them in the simulators to withstand the curbs here in Qatar.
Oscar almost has DRS to Russell, so if you can do maybe a tenth quicker, that would help.
Oscar almost has DRS to Russell. Now, I would suggest that is saying Piastri's nearly out of giving Russell DRS. 0.8 of a second is the gap right now between Piastri and Russell.
Yeah, they're looking to break away now, the two McLarens. They'd like to get out of DRS range of George Russell, which would then, in turn, put George Russell under threat from Carlos Sainz.
Sainz is having a solid race here for Ferrari in a circuit where they didn't think they would go well. The high to medium speed corners, the long duration corners, really not playing to Ferrari's strengths this season. At the moment, damage limitation then for Carlos Sainz. Charles Leclerc has closed up to within half a second now of Lewis Hamilton, but I wonder also how much tyres are playing a part here for the two Ferraris.
Charles Leclerc looked hands down miles quicker than Carlos Sainz when it came to free practice, but Carlos Sainz has turned it around in qualifying, and then in the race today looked much quicker, as we see Carlos Sainz actually fastest lap of the race that last time round.
Sainz is full of confidence at the moment, I think, and I wonder how much he's fired up by the fact he's leaving this team at the end of the year. Not his choice, of course, but trying to make waves and score good results with a top team while he still can before he moves to join Alex Albon at Williams next season. We don't know where Williams will be, but they won't, I can imagine, be fighting for podiums on the regular next season at least, although a lot of long-term changes being made there by team principal James Vowles. Williams, we should say, struggling this weekend, especially after having 15 crashes this season, 6 of them major incidents as well, having to require big repairs. The last one for Franco Colapinto in Q2 in Vegas. Here we go then. We have the back of Charles Leclerc closing up to behind Hamilton, and there's contact into turn 1, wheel to wheel, between the 7-time champion, the two teammates for next season, wheel to wheel through the left-hander of turn 2. Hamilton just about gives him the space as they curve out of the right-hander of turn 3. That gives Hamilton the inside, but Leclerc has a nose ahead as he sweeps around 4 into 5, the two right-handers, before he slams onto the braking zone of the hairpin at turn 6. Leclerc has got the move done ahead of Hamilton. Nice racing, but there was a bit of contact there at the start.
Yeah, great racing between two F1 greats. Really cool. This is when downforce is fun, isn't it, Harry? Racing like that, where you can run side by side through high-speed corners. Not necessarily the best for action all the time, but racing like this is just superb. Look how Charles Leclerc just leans a little bit on Lewis Hamilton and then fires it round the outside at the next corner. Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, they're both quite fair with each other there. They're going to be teammates next year, but that was really great racing.
That was as close as you want to get, and if that is a precursor to what we might see from the two Ferraris next year, bring it on. Lap 14 of 19 at the final sprint of the season in Qatar. Lando Norris has just crossed the line and he's got the fastest lap. His teammate, though, is under pressure, has to defend into the right-hander because George Russell was still within the DRS zone, managed to close in. Piastri with a late move to the apex, fended off the British racer, but Norris has now left Piastri for dust. He's not giving him the help of the DRS, and Piastri now is struggling to keep Russell behind. Russell wants this P2, he can taste it.
Yeah, I think that radio message that McLaren gave to Lando got through to George as well. George picked up the pace over the last couple of laps and has really been threatening Oscar Piastri. I'm surprised George Russell wasn't on the radio saying that was late.
Mate, that was late. Twice now.
Well, there we go.
Perfect timing.
It was a late meandering move to the inside. I don't think it was illegal, but it was certainly late. Now George Russell has actually made a couple of mistakes on this lap. His heart rate will be high as we see a replay now. Just a slow move to the inside. But he did leave room I would say that he did leave enough racing room there. I think it's on the limit, but it's fair.
It's a tricky corner because it's not a hard stop, is it? It does meander, sweeps through the right, so it does close up on you quicker than you think. Piastri keeping ahead of Russell, who did have signs coming very close behind him, still is there with DRS for the Spaniard in the Scarlet Red Ferrari. We cut to a picture of these two fighting, and there was a little bit of dust from the gravel trap on the exit of 15. I wonder if Russell or Sainz just dipped a wheel onto the gravel there, and
I think Lando's made a mistake somewhere. Lando's made a mistake.
Let's listen.
Yeah, I'm starting to struggle with the front, so do I save him or?
Yeah, please help Oscar.
Do I save him? Yes, please help Oscar. Was it Norris who perhaps dipped a wheel into the gravel? Because when Piastri looked like he'd fallen to over a second behind Norris, that gap has now closed up to within a second.
We see the Red Bull of Sergio Perez in the pits trying a different front wing, or has he damaged it perhaps?
Full-on testing session really for Sergio Perez and Red Bull now. Day goes from bad to worse, down in 19th, only ahead of Zhou Guanyu, whose soft tyres have completely fallen off the cliff. He is way behind the rest of the field. He'll be lucky not to get lapped at this stage. He's just coming around the final corner now, and Norris is approaching just through the right-hander of turn 14. So that 15 of 19, Norris leads Piastri, then comes Russell and Sainz. The top four all absolutely glued to each other as they make their way around the final corner now. Then comes Leclerc in fifth, ahead of Hamilton. Hulkenberg's holding on to seventh. Verstappen is behind him though, but about 1.6 seconds back is the Dutchman in the Red Bull. At the moment, looking set to score just the 1.8. Gasly and Magnussen the top 10. Then comes Alonso, Bottas, Stroll, Ocon. Albon is in 15th, ahead of Lawson and Tsunoda. Colapinto 18th, ahead of Zhou. And now Perez is plumb last, having just made a pit stop for a front wing. And a reminder, this is the sprint, so there are no mandatory pit stops. It is a flat-out dash to the flag. And this is a crucial point-scoring mission now for McLaren in order to take the Constructors' Championship, their first since 1998. This weekend, they must finish the sprint first and second. Then they must finish first and second in the Grand Prix and take the fastest lap point as well. If they do all of that, they will take the Constructors' crown. Sainz and Leclerc for Ferrari doing everything they can to try and maximise their point-scoring ability. They're down in fourth and fifth at the moment. They can't get ahead of the Mercedes of George Russell, which is doing a good job so far in third. He's been applying pressure all race long to the back of Oscar Piastri, but hasn't been able to find a way through. Piastri now just on the periphery though of that 1 second margin he needs for the DRS to stay ahead of Russell. That DRS being given to Piastri by his teammate Lando Norris, whose tyres have now given up the ghost perhaps, as he reported on the radio, struggling with grip. Piastri outside that 1 second window. Let's see, will he get the DRS? You get it when you're in the detection zone, which is just before turn 16. He does get it with 3 laps to go. That will keep him ahead of George Russell, who does close in. Just seems like Russell is so much more aggressive and confident going into turn 1 at this stage compared to the McLaren ahead.
He has an earlier turn in, doesn't he, into turn 1, which then tightens up the radius a little bit mid to exit, but it doesn't seem to harm him that much. That Mercedes working very, very well here under the lights in Qatar. I would say that George Russell for the Grand Prix tomorrow is a real threat to McLaren. I don't think that McLaren will be too worried about the Ferraris. Max Verstappen is Max Verstappen and could always be a threat, although today he's had a slight off day. But certainly George Russell versus the 2 McLarens is one to look out for tomorrow.
That's the sound of Charles Leclerc, who is currently behind his teammate Carlos Sainz by about 3 seconds. He's a little bit on his own actually in fifth is Charles Leclerc. 1.6 seconds ahead of Hamilton. Then comes Hulkenberg in seventh. Verstappen is eighth. Then comes Gasly and Magnussen, the top 10, but it's only the top 8 that score points. The closest battle out on track is now between second place Oscar Piastri, third place George Russell, and fourth place Carlos Sainz, all fighting with each other. Piastri will not get the DRS on this penultimate lap. He's fallen outside of the 1 second margin. That's going to help Russell close up. Will he try a late dive to the inside? He does, but the nature of the corner allows Piastri that later turn. It sweeps round and holds on to second. Russell can't find a way through. The overtaking opportunities are difficult around here.
Yeah, that early turn-in allows him to carry more entry speed, but then hurts him mid to exit. That later turn-in for Oscar allows him to carry much more minimum, which was why you saw that gap increase mid to exit.
0.7 of a second between Piastri and Russell, and Sainz is just lurking in the background in that scarlet red Ferrari, waiting for something to happen ahead of him that might well benefit the Spaniard in his final sprint race for Ferrari. Max Verstappen is having a bit of a race to forget, isn't he? Down in 8th. He's not going to hold on to this sprint with fond memories.
He's just won his 4th World Drivers' Championship.
You've got to perform in every race.
I think, remember, he was very thirsty for a long time in Vegas.
Absolutely, he was. I think George Russell bumped into him about 5 o'clock in the morning somewhere. He's currently down in 8th, about 1.8 seconds back on Hulkenberg, who is doing a good job to pick up a couple of points for Haas in 7th. He'll get 2 points to further extend Haas's advantage in 6th place in the Constructors' Championship. As we now start the final lap, and 1, 2, 3, 4 Formula 1 cars, the top 4 all line astern, heading down to turn 1, but it's Russell who tries another move into the right-hander of turn 1. Can he put Piastri off? Can he force the Australian in his second season into some kind of mistake? Piastri putting that McLaren in all the right places so far to hold on to it. Norris playing the team game here, falling back slightly, helping his teammate with the aid of that drag reduction system, which is just giving Piastri enough to stop Russell charging on by down that main straight. And while they fight, the Ferrari of Sainz is right there with them.
Yeah, Sainz is just hanging on to this, the top 3, isn't he? He's never really had a go at George Russell. I think George Russell has now had his moment. He's had a sniff multiple times into turn 1, and that does look like the only real place where he could overtake Oscar Piastri. Everywhere else, Piastri has had the pace to keep him well and truly behind.
Has the moment been and gone then for the sound you're hearing of George Russell in the Mercedes? The 2 McLarens are leading the way. It was a good start to this race for Oscar Piastri, and round the final corner, Lando Norris really bailing out right at the end. Is it going to be what's happened right at the end there? And for some reason Norris has let Piastri through right at the very end in the final corner, and Piastri takes the final sprint of the season. Out of the final corner, Norris moved to the right hand side, and then Piastri drives through. Were they trying to go side by side across the line? And it's Oscar Piastri's win in the sprint. Is he paying back a favour perhaps for the last sprint in Sao Paulo where positions were swapped? But it's Oscar Piastri now who has been helped out in this race by his teammate Lando Norris with the aid of DRS to keep Russell behind. Let's hear from Piastri.
Yep. Yeah, thank you for the teamwork. Much appreciated, and great load of points, so thanks everybody.
I think that's a bit of thank you very much for your hard work earlier on in the season from Lando Norris to try and keep the team harmony there. They do have a good relationship. McLaren, headed up by team principal Andrea Stella, want them to fight hard next season, but they want good atmosphere inside that Papaya team as well. McLaren extend their advantage in the Constructors' Championship. They can't clinch it just yet, but having led from start to almost the finish, Lando Norris settles for second place in this race.
Did you see that coming?
I didn't.
Neither did I.
It helps Piastri out in the Drivers' Championship as well. It gives him some extra points to try and keep Leclerc honest, but actually it's more to keep Sainz behind. So it does help Piastri out for 4th in the Drivers' Championship, but that is the sprint. It goes to Piastri. Norris second.
I think you're right. I think that's a payback race for Oscar for his hard work in Sao Paulo, where they did reverse those roles. But yes, certainly didn't see that coming, not with the fight being so hard for second place in this Drivers' World Championship. I cannot wait to hear what Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri have to say about it after the race. But a great day for everybody in Papaya.
It reminds me of years ago, and Angie will remember the race, but I can't. Michael Schumacher and alongside Rubens Barrichello trying to go side by side across the line, and Schumacher was just slightly behind at the end.
Indianapolis 2002, and they messed it up.
Yeah. It reminds me, it's got elements of that, the way Norris pulled right to the side at the end, but that is the sprint done and dusted. 19 laps with a bizarre end for us, but McLaren sounding like they planned that one from the start. Piastri takes the sprint win, the final one of the season ahead of Norris. George Russell comes home third, then it's Sainz, Leclerc, Hamilton, Hülkenberg and Verstappen round out the top 8. Those are your point scorers. Rosanna.
Wow, I really enjoyed that sprint, but what a change-up right at the end. And as I've been standing here as the top 3 drivers have pulled into their positions on the start-finish straight, just 1, 2 and 3 there. Zach Brown, of course, the team principal CEO of McLaren, was standing there clapping the drivers in. And Piastri and Norris have just embraced and sort of patted each other's shoulders. So, yeah, team spirit in full force. Lando Norris just waving at the crowd who give a big cheer. And Oscar Piastri is taking his helmet off very slowly. Now his balaclava, taking out his radio. That was a very interesting end to what I found quite a thrilling sprint.
Absolutely, it sets us up nicely for the Grand Prix tomorrow. But we will have more F1 action today, don't you worry. You can listen to qualifying for the Grand Prix. That'll be on the BBC Sport website and app later on today from 5 to 6 this evening, before the session starts at 6 o'clock on the dot. Don't be late, but that is a nice warm-up for us. And, I mean, what does that tell you about McLaren, Sam, and the ethos and the atmosphere within that team right now?
I think it's very healthy, to be honest. It looks very healthy. Obviously, Lando, he's going to be disappointed. He wants to win races. Sprint race, proper Grand Prix, doesn't matter. He wants to be number 1. But I think what Andrea Stella has brought to the team is absolute harmony, from drivers to engineers, from people back at the factory at MTC. Everybody seems to be working well. Remember 4 or 5 years ago, this team, it didn't have any sponsorship on the car. Now they've got more sponsors than everybody else on the grid, pretty much. It's a very marketable team. They've clearly got the quickest, if not one of the quickest cars on the grid. It's a great place to work. Everything's working very well.
I'll tell you what, Norris timed that. The margins were so fine, because it wasn't like they had a big gap to George Russell in third. And Norris could have really lost out there if he'd just come up the power too early, couldn't get back on it straight away. But in the end, they executed that perfectly, did McLaren, as the 2 papaya cars line up, as you say, Sam. The team absolutely littered with sponsors on both cars. And, well, we can hear how it all unfolded. They're talking to 6-time IndyCar winner James Hinchcliffe.
And third place today in the sprint race, George Russell for Mercedes. Look, you had a very exciting race there with Oscar Piastri. Lost the position off the start, but just walk us through some of those battles and those runs down to turn 1.
I mean, it was very close going to turn 1 on a couple of occasions. It was obviously so frustrating every lap. Lando backing up, giving Oscar the DRS. Obviously, I understand why they did that, but when you're out here, you're fighting, you want to give it everything, and you want to put a race on for the fans, it was just pretty infuriating. But nevertheless, it was, P3 this afternoon is going to be the important one.
And so thinking about this afternoon, tires are a big talking point here at Qatar. How do the tires hold up? You had those mediums for the entire 19 laps. Did they hold up the whole time, or did you learn a lot for this afternoon as well?
Yeah, they were definitely dropping a little bit, to be honest. I struggled towards the end, but I think Lando had some good pace. Oscar was struggling a little bit. So it would have been good to be able to go head-to-head with Lando and see what the true pace would have been, as I think he had quite a lot in the pocket, just giving Oscar the DRS.
Yeah, well, less than a 10th off pole yesterday. Let's see what you got tonight. Congratulations.
Cheers, guys.
George Russell's first top 3 sprint finish of the season. Understands McLaren's reasons.
Second place, Lando Norris. That was an exciting final lap. But look, let's start at the beginning. Good getaway. You seem to lead the race comfortably. Did you have a lot of pace in hand as you held back to just try to keep DRS range for Oscar?
A little bit. It's always difficult to know. But we scored 1-2. That's what we were aiming for today. We've got maximum points. So we're happy. We're happy as a team. We've executed things perfectly. And I think the pace was good. I probably could have pushed a little bit more than what I was doing. but we wanted to keep the others behind, so we tried to help out and not let George get too close, you know. So we did our job, and that's the main thing.
Yeah, it was close at the end there, though. A little bit of payback maybe for Brazil. How tight was it? Were you concerned that you were not going to be able to orchestrate that? I mean, it was a tenth and a second between you and Oscar, and only 3 more back to George. That was tight.
I know. It was probably a bit closer than what I was wanting. Yeah, but I planned to do it since Brazil, you know. So, just what I thought was best. It's probably a little bit sketchy. The team told me not to do it, but I thought I could get away with it, and we did. So honestly, I don't mind. I'm not here to win sprint races. I'm here to win races and a championship, but that's not gone to plan, you know. So I did the best we could, and I look forward to tomorrow. Okay, real quick, let's talk about the physicality of this place. It's so fast. It's so tough on the drivers. You've done 19 laps. How was it? It was tough. Yeah, my neck's not too happy, you know. So yes, it's going to be a difficult race tomorrow. I mean, these conditions, these cold conditions, the wind, it's a lot quicker than last year, and it's even more physical, which I didn't think was possible, you know. So it's tricky, but that's a challenge we got to deal with. I need to hit the gym maybe a bit more, but all good otherwise. All right, congratulations and best of luck this afternoon. Thank you, mate. And your winner for the second time in a sprint format, second time in a row here in Qatar, Oscar Piastri. Look, it started right off the green. You got that great move around George, and then really for you, it was all about defense for the first part of the race.
It was about defense for the whole race, to be honest. I had a good start and a good turn one, obviously, and then just didn't quite have the pace. I think I killed the front a little bit early on, and then I was struggling a bit for the rest of the sprint. But some great teamwork. You know, I think without that help, it would have been a much more difficult sprint. So nice to have a McLaren 1-2.
Now you drive around in race format. You're 3.5 seconds slower than what you guys are going to be doing in qualifying here in a few hours. So mentally, how do you change? How do you prepare for the next time that you strap in the car just in a few hours here to be driving that much faster?
To be honest, here it's probably the smallest change from qualifying to the race. I think in a lot of places it's 6 or 7 seconds, and the grip feels much different here. We're still pushing pretty much flat out in the race, so it'll be a change for sure. But I think we've got a few tweaks we want to try and make, and hopefully make the car a bit quicker and make the driver a bit quicker as well.
And now that you got a sense of it from qualifying yesterday, do you think there's enough in it? I know you said a couple little mistakes on your lap. You got a legitimate shot at pole?
I think so, yeah. It's very, very tight. You know, I think from first to fifth or sixth was only 2 or 3 tenths, so there's not much margin for error. But I think we've got a few things we can improve a bit, and I think we're in for a shout. But everyone's keeping us on our toes.
All right, well, congratulations, best luck this afternoon, and now let's go to the presentation of the trophies.
Well, there you have it then, your 1, 2, 3 from the sprint. Oscar Piastri joins the likes of Verstappen and Bottas as the only drivers to take multiple sprint race wins since it was introduced as a format. Norris in P2, his 4th consecutive top 3 finish in the sprint. Russell 3rd, his first top 3 sprint of the season. Then comes Sainz, who has scored in every sprint race this year, doing a good job for Ferrari to try and maximise points. Let's go straight down, though, to Rosanna Tennant.
Thanks, Harry. Yes, I'm with team principal at McLaren, Andrea Stella. Congratulations. That was a bit of a wild sprint. I don't think we all saw that ending coming like that.
Well, it was more than wild. I think it was tense. And one of the reasons is that Ferrari was on new tyres effectively. It was just a set scrapped in practice. Russell had a set with only 1 time lap on. We were on a set with 2 time laps on, which takes away some performance of the car. And this meant that we needed to defend today, and with the headwind and the long straight and the big rear wing we are running, we were exposed down the straight, so it required some collaboration between Lando and Oscar, which our 2 boys executed very well. I have to say, brilliant drive by Lando, very precise, definitely high standards driving, and this allowed us to finish on a 1-2. And then Lando took the opportunity at the end to return the favor that Oscar did to him in Brazil in the sprint event, which again shows the values that our drivers bring. We were a little nervous because Russell was so close, so we said to Lando, like, no worries, we are happy with this. Obviously, Lando had the situation under control and he managed to get the swap done.
No worries. Did you actually say that on the team radio?
We didn't say no worries. This is the version for the post-sprint interviews. No, really very proud of both Lando and Oscar today. Very important points, fantastic driving, very good information acquired also for what we need for the race. We look forward to the rest of the weekend.
And of course it feels like it should be the end of the day and we should all be going home to our beds, but we've got the small little matter of qualifying for the Grand Prix. Do you feel confident you could lock out the front row and then go on to win the Grand Prix tomorrow?
Well, it's, like if you look yesterday at the qualifying, it was Russell within the same tenth of a second. I think the Ferraris were complaining about balance. I'm sure they will fix their balance problem. So I would expect a very, very tight qualifying session. And definitely we need to make some adaptations. I think possibly in terms of top speed so that we are less exposed in the straight when it comes to the race.
Well, good luck with that. Nerve-wracking for you, exciting for us. Thank you.
Thanks.
That was brilliant. Rosanna Tennant talking to the team principal of McLaren, Andrea Stella, after they secure a 1-2 in the sprint. Piastri in the end ahead of Lando Norris, then George Russell, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc the top five, Lewis Hamilton in sixth, Nico Hülkenberg in seventh for Haas. Then comes Max Verstappen in eighth. After him, well, they were the point scorers. Gasly and Magnussen round out the top 10 ahead of Alonso. Bottas was 12th ahead of Stroll. Ocon and Albon 14th and 15th. Liam Lawson ahead of his teammate Tsunoda, the two RBs, in 16th and 17th. Colapinto from the pits went up to 18th. Zhou Guanyu did make a pit stop right at the end to get off his soft tyres who'd fallen off the cliff, finished 19th ahead of Sergio Perez, who started from the pit lane, didn't get going when the green light went on, and then made a front wing change later in that race. So a one to forget for sure for the Mexican in the Red Bull. Right, Sandbird, that's teed us up quite nicely for the Grand Prix. What are you expecting for qualifying?
I think more of the same, to be honest, Harry. I think the McLarens look incredibly strong. As you heard Andrea Stella say, they were on slightly older medium compound tyres compared to everybody that they were racing against, so they were at a little bit of a disadvantage. I think the two papaya cars will be up there. George Russell has been incredibly strong as well. I don't think you can ever discount Max Verstappen, but he certainly doesn't look like he's got the top line pace this weekend. Lewis Hamilton hasn't looked like prime Lewis Hamilton, and the Ferraris look a little bit off as well. So I think it's going to be between George Russell, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam Bird. Thank you, Andrew Benson. Thank you as well to Rosanna Tennant. The gap now after that sprint between McLaren and Ferrari for the constructors title has gone up. It is now 30 points in McLaren's favour. They still need to try and get a 1-2 finish in the Grand Prix and take fastest lap to get the points they need to secure it this weekend in Qatar. That is it for the sprint. The floodlights are well and truly on. They will stay on to illuminate this Qatar track because we will go qualifying for the Grand Prix later on this evening. You can join us for that on the BBC Sport website and app from 5 to 6 this evening ahead of the green light going on at 6 o'clock on the dot. Don't be late. We'll see you then. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.